into your living rooms perhaps directly. I hope you're all healthy, safe, hunkered down as I am. Tonight we're going to talk about food and genetics and how food influences the expression of your genes and makes you who you are. My hope really is to teach you something about how your body works, because it's my strong belief that when you have that knowledge, you make better decisions for yourself and your family. And when you have some knowledge about how your body works, you feel more in control about what you can do to make yourself healthier. And that brings a sense of calm, which we all need right now. So let me get my slides up on this magical, technological new world that we're all living in. So epigenetics has been able to solve this age-old question, this long-standing mystery that we've all had. Which is it, our environment or our genes that make us who we are? And we've all intuitively known that it's both, but now we know how those two connect. And that is what the field of epigenetics is all about. How the environment, how nurture influences our genes, our nature is the magic of epigenetics. First, let's talk about food. So there are many things that influence the epigenome. There's the genes, the genome, and the epigenome is what we're talking about. There are many influences on it, and you'll hear about some of them in a few minutes, but the biggest one arguably is what we put in our mouth 3 times a day. Our diet influences our epigenome more than perhaps anything else, and we have a problem in this country with our diet, as most of you know. Our diet, processed food, fast food specifically, has been exported to the rest of the world and is now referred to as the Western diet. You can read that as the American diet. So just doing a quick survey through the literature, I found 5, 6 articles within a minute. I could have found a lot more, but just to give you an idea, the Western diet is not a good thing. It increases the risk of cancer, especially in women. It's associated with even more severe heart disease, coronary artery disease, than any other diet. The Western diet has associated even with rises in autoimmune diseases. In fact, the ratio of junk food to good food is a direct risk factor for developing autoimmune diseases. And even Alzheimer's. The Western diet significantly increases the risk of Alzheimer's. So we need to worry about what we're eating and what we're feeding our food. In fact, eating crappy food is not a reward, it's a punishment. And for children, it might even be worse than a punishment. It might really be a death sentence, because this is the first generation of children to have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. So yeah, Happy Meals aren't so happy, and encouraging children to eat what we eat maybe isn't the best parenting around. This New York Times article caught my eye because of the title, "Our Food is Killing Too Many of Us." I thought that was kind of interesting, because I would have thought "Our Food is Killing Us" would have been enough of a title, but they're right, our food is killing too many of us. And the article goes on to discuss the fact that we're all debating politically in Washington, should pay for healthcare, how should healthcare be allotted and so on, and accessed. And the article points out, if we could worry about the cause a little bit more, about why we need so much healthcare, why we're one of the highest spending and not so great results from that money in all the industrialized nations, we might have a better shot at providing adequate health care for everybody. But as it stands, the costs are going up because chronic disease is going up at an exponential rate. And instead of worrying about the cause of that, which is clearly our diet, people are more worried about how to pay for it all. It's the wrong approach. So again, our topic is food and how food changes who you are. Most of us know if you eat pizza and burgers all day, you change who you are, you get bigger. And if you eat greens and vegetables, you change who you are, you get smaller. How does that happen? How exactly does that happen? We also know in more detail, because that's just the calories, that food is much more than just calories. Food is actually information. And so we know that the food, if it's comprised mostly of processed, salty, not really foods at all, the burgers, the pizzas, the fries, they're really non-foods. They have negative nutritional value. They provide calories with no nutrients, which is a quandary for a cell. Those foods actually can trigger the immune system to be really confused, because some of these foods are so unfood-like, they are now toxic. They're toxins, and the immune system really doesn't know how to eat a toxin. It does other things with it. So does our microbiome, and so apparently does our brain. When we provide unfoods as opposed to real foods, our body changes and reacts very differently. It gets false information. When we eat plant-based diets and plant foods, we get different information. We get information that all's well with the world, that there is feast, not famine, that we are calm and able to eat quietly the foods that our cells really need, so life must be safe. Very different messages from different kinds of foods, and we'll see the results of that in just a few minutes. But first, I want to give you some kind of sad news, and then we'll get to the good stuff, I promise, because there's solutions here. This was an infographic I found that was put out by the CDCP, that's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that's its actual name, CDCP, and the armed services together. And it was kind of scary because what they're saying is 71% of our current youth in this country would not be eligible to join the armed forces should they so desire, because 71% of them would be out because they're overweight or unhealthy. 71% of our youth is not able to go to boot camp. And of the rest of the folks that can't go, it's because of lack of education, which is also a very sad thing to say out loud in 2020. And drug abuse and criminal records is third. So 71% of our children are not healthy enough. And it gets a little worse. Some percentage similar of enlisted people, active duty soldiers, are also not fit enough to go through boot camp again. And so as a result, the expenditures in the VAs of illnesses and long recovery times for injuries and time spent training is just immense and is adding to the budget. In fact, one of the retired generals that's on this panel said it very, very well. He said, over the last decade, we've experienced increasing difficulty in recruiting soldiers due to the decline in the health of our nation's youth. Unless we see significant change in physical activity and nutrition in America, our national security will be affected. What more can I say? The solutions on the bottom of the infogram are also very educational. The very first one shows a picture of fruits, vegetables, and berries. It doesn't show a sign saying less salt, less fat, less processed food. It says more produce. More produce is the #1 way to solve this problem. And they list the specific benefits: improved brain function, delayed muscle fatigue, accelerated recovery from strenuous activity. These are all things soldiers need, right? Improved overall military readiness, sustained health and disease prevention. And then #2 is more physical activity. Our government's been trying to get this message across to us for decades as well. Some of you may remember the pyramid, the 5-a-day pyramid. Then it went to fruits and veggies, more matters, a very apt title, more matters. However, the message really didn't get across. Then they went to the choose my plate, half your plate should be produce at every meal. That hasn't really gone very far either. Now, to be fair, they have a very limited budget, and they are at the whim of two different masters. Half the USDA's budget is paid for by industry and half by tax dollars. So they have to balance those two. However, 11% of Americans knew what and followed the USDA's guidelines for produce intake about 30 years ago. It was about 11%. And in 2018, about 11% of people follow the USA guidelines and get the appropriate amount of produce per day, which is considered the #1 most important food to eat. So nothing's changed, even though today's logo and brand is have a plant, fruits and veggies, and you can sign up for their emails. They're quite lovely with recipes, and it's nice to get an email that's titled have a plant every other day. But you get the gist. The government's trying to get us to understand that the way to improve our health is to eat more plants. In fact, every 5 years, they put out the new dietary guidelines, and every 5 years for the past 3 or 4, they have increased not only the number of servings, but the size of servings of fruits, vegetables, and berries that they recommend. So they do this because the data is so strong. They do this based on the research and the facts. They do not do this because industry wants them to. In fact, that's quite the opposite. It's a big fight. But the data is very clear that we currently need about 7 to 13 servings of produce per day, depending on your level of activity, your age, and your illness. But 7, we've gone from 5 to 7, and even 5 isn't happening for 89% of Americans. Even 5 isn't happening. Michael Pollan's a wonderful author. If you've read his stuff, you know I'm right. But he's at heart an investigative journalist, and a very good one. And so he spent years going through all the studies, all the clinical trials and literature on really what is the best diet? Because there's such controversy around all that. So he did a very in-depth, unbiased look and came up with this famous summary in 3 short lines. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Couldn't say it better. Of course, he means eat real food, unprocessed food, from the ground up kind of food, not too much, and mostly plants. And that's because it turns out that all diets are not equal. That the amount of plant food you have in the diet determines really how healthy it is, because it works out that if 80% of your diet, 80% is vegetables primarily, fruit a couple a day, but mostly vegetables, then the rest almost doesn't matter. Whether you eat meat or not, whether you do this or that, it's the 80% of plants that matters, because then whatever else you do, you have the basis of good foundation for nutrition to be able to handle this or that or the other. So it's the vegetables that provide the most important and hard to get antioxidants, phytonutrients, things we'll talk about in just a second. This is so powerful that the Tufts University scientists last year came up with a very careful study using very advanced statistics and data from all over our country, and came up with they call it a low side figure. What they're saying is that if we simply subsidize 30% of the cost of fruits and vegetables to low-income folks, Medicare, Medicaid, 30%, we would save $100 billion in healthcare expenditures. Not only would we save $100 billion in healthcare expenditures, but not for nothing, we'd save almost, over 500,000 deaths from heart disease. We would save 120,000 new diabetics from becoming diabetics, and we'd save 2 million or so people from ever having a stroke or a heart attack. They may not kill them, but that will certainly change their lives forever. That's a huge return on our investment. And they went on to add and do some math. If we also subsidize some healthy oils like olive oil, nuts and seeds, and lean protein like fish, these are the very expensive things in folks' budget right now. If we subsidize those as well, we would even save more. So we know what to do. We just have to find a way to convince people and make it happen. Because at the end of the day, we are not vitamin deficient, or we'd be fixed by now. The vitamin industry is $8 trillion industry. We'd all be healthy if that was the case. We're not. We're getting worse. The fact is that we are plant food deficient. Why? What do fruits, vegetables, and berries have that nothing else, that pizza doesn't have? Why can't I just live on French fries? It would be nice, right? But you can't. There's no way. You cannot argue with the cell. A cell needs what a cell needs. And so there are many things that fruits, vegetables, and berries provide us that are just not otherwise available. Vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and proteins, absolutely positively, micronutrients like that are all in fruits, vegetables, and berries. But there's also fiber, both soluble and insoluble, and that is critical for your microbiome. There are phytonutrients, thousands of them. Many of them have been named. You may know them. Lutein, zeaxanthin for your eyes, resveratrol for blood flow. Those were always in food. We just didn't have a name for them until a few years ago. There are many unnamed nutrients that are equally as important, maybe much more important. We just haven't discovered them yet, but they are in food. They've always been in food. All of this good food feeds your microbiome, which is the bacteria that live in your gut, where there's a lot more of them than of us. And without them, we wouldn't have an immune system that functions. And without them, we wouldn't be able to digest our food very well. Without a microbiome, we wouldn't be alive, really. And so the better you take care of your microbiome, the better you're taking care of your immune system, because they're intermittent, they're interwoven to a point where you can't separate them really at all. Produce also provides raw enzymes, which, if you remember anything from Biology 101, enzymes make the world go round. And then lastly, and most importantly for our talk tonight, produce, vegetables, berries, and fruits specifically, give us methyl groups. And methyl groups are required to protect and heal your DNA. And I hope to show you that they're also required to either express or not express your DNA. And if you don't have enough methyl groups at hand, readily available to do whatever you need to do in that moment, you may have some DNA damage or may suffer a consequence that is preventable if you simply had enough of the right place methyl groups. So again, oxidative stress, just to remind you, phytonutrients are typically antioxidants, but that's the other huge category that fruits, vegetables, and berries provide in a balanced way, because antioxidants are not a thing. They are a system. They're a very intricately balanced system, and taking 1 or 2 or 3 different antioxidants may help, but it may also unbalance the system. So getting your antioxidants in the balanced way that your cells are designed to get them, which is food. We evolved eating food, bark, tubers, all sorts of plants. We did not evolve with bottles of vitamins on the tree. So getting enough plants obviates the need to take not all supplements, but a whole lot of things that are touted as being antioxidants. Food provides the most important antioxidants that we have in a balanced way. And the lack of antioxidants is what's called free radical damage or oxidative stress, same thing. Free radicals are high energy electrons that destroy or injure, I should say, whatever tissue, cell, or part of the cell they happen to be near. So wrinkles come from free radicals in the skin, and chronic fatigue may come from free radicals inside a cell. The point is, almost all disease has been traced back to an excess of free radicals and an insufficiency of antioxidants, which is a recurring theme in our nation's chronic disease crisis. So again, fruits and vegetables provide those in a way that nothing else really can. And at the end of the day, a cell is our most basic unit of functioning, and you are only as healthy as your unhealthiest cell, because the way your cells function determines how you function. That's all there is to it. So back to our topic more specifically, the genome and the epigenome and how all this food stuff matters to how we express our genes. Well, a few years ago it was realized that genetics and DNA was not the only thing that made us us. We knew that obviously from just observing life, but the science was a little lagging. And so Time Magazine, one of my favorite sources of scientific information, along with the New York Times, says DNA is not your destiny. And that's true. So before I delve into this, let me just do a really quick primer on genetics for those of you that aren't up on this stuff. The book of life is referred to as our genome. So all of the genes that we have and all the chromosomes that we have are referred to as the book of life, because the book of life contains every single recipe to make us us, to make us have eyebrows here and not in the middle of our nose, to make us have 2 arms, 2 fingers, 2 legs. All of it is contained in the book of life. Every single cell has a recipe in there, and every single function that we do, muscle, movement, thought, mood, all have recipes in the book of life. Those books are stored like a library on our chromosomes. We have 23 pairs from mom, 23 from mom, 23 from dad, which makes 46 pairs. That's our book of life together, okay? So on these chromosomes, we have the genes. So on the bottom left of the screen, you see a picture of a cell, the gray blob, and in the middle is the nucleus, and that's a chromosome. That little X thing is a chromosome. And if you unwound that chromosome a lot, you'd eventually get to the alphabet of this library of the book of life. And the alphabet are 4 letters only. The bases of nucleotides, they're called base pairs. And this is what forms the book of life. And these 4 letters code for proteins in a sequence of events. So this is the entire book of life. Every cell except for 1 or 2 contains these 46 chromosomes. And so here we are. Every cell has the potential to be every cell, and yet it doesn't. So that's one conundrum about this book of life thing. If every cell has everything it needs to be any cell, then how come it doesn't? How come a kidney cell doesn't become a brain cell one day, or vice versa? Well, the same answer as to why identical twins are not identical at all. Identical twins have an identical DNA, but if anyone's ever known a set of identical twins, they're very different people. They truly are. And that's because of those little red circles that you might see on the top and the bottom of a couple of base pairs. On the top right of the screen and the bottom left of the screen. They have in little letters, if you can see it, called ME. That stands for methyl group. So sitting above epigenetics, above the genetic code, are these methyl groups that signal, read this gene, but don't read that one. They are ways to know what parts of the book are available to you. So a kidney cell, once it has become a kidney cell, all the brain cell recipes are shut off. There's methyl groups that say, no, you cannot read those recipes. That book is not for you. You are a kidney cell. You must do your kidney thing. And all these other recipes no longer pertain to you. Stem cells are the cells that have all of it available to them. Other cells have parts taken away by methyl groups. Methyl groups tell us how to express or not express certain parts of our genes. And that explains a lot. That explains how the environment can affect our genes. Mark Hyman's a colleague and a friend, and he said it very well. Your gene expression can change based on what you eat, how you move, your thoughts, your feelings, and your social connections. And I would add your environmental conditions, cold, hot, sun, and so on. Let me give you an example. My dog has a gene for fur. Yours probably does too. But there are also genes that modify that fur, because when it gets cold out, he all of a sudden develops a very thick winter coat. The signal in the environment of cold turned on a gene that said, fur, get heavier, it's cold out, and for winter. And then the reverse happens in spring. It gets warm, consistently warm, and some other gene gets activated, or epigenetic rather, not gene, sorry. Some other epigenetic change happens to tell the fur gene, all right, no, we're done now with the heavy stuff. You can shed it all over tomorrow's living room, couch, all over, right? In the spring, shed that winter coat. Same gene for fur, but it gets altered, it gets changed by the environment. So epigenetics are all about the marks that change the way genes are expressed. They're those big red blobs on the side of that helix, that famous double helix of our genes. But they do not change the actual genes. That's what's kind of unique and was not known before, how you can do that, and this is the mechanism. Let me give you another example besides my dog, because this is more pertinent. So in times of feast, we all have a gene for hunger, right? We all have experienced hunger. It's a basic necessity. But there are genes that alter that hunger gene to different degrees. So I'm just going to make up a story. Let's just say there's a gene for comma. There isn't, but let's just say there's a gene for comma, kind of like the gene for my dog's hair. So in certain circumstances, comma is expressed, and in other circumstances, it's not. So in times of feast and calm, low cortisol, low stress hormones, things are great. There's always been plenty to eat. I haven't experienced hunger in weeks or months. Then the comma gene is expressed. And that might look like this. That's it, Grandma. Come on down, let's have a feast. But in times of famine, where stress hormones are really high up there and you haven't slept because it's war, it's famine, it's running for your life, things are bad, right? Your stress hormones are up, everything in your body is saying, we've got problems here, and we're hungry. We're hungry in a different way now. So now you do not express that comma. And it goes from feast to scary famine. So commas save grandmas. And you don't want to be in that situation with no comma, right? But that's how it works. Now we have let's eat grandma, because we're hungry in a different way. So in biology, nothing is by itself. Everything is interconnected. No nutrient works alone. No part of the body works alone. We are this holistic thing that we have even no language for. We're so used to breaking us down into sections, but we're not. So you can't separate nutrition from the epigenome, what we're talking about tonight, from the microbiome, the bugs that live in our gut. Because the bugs that live in our gut have thousands times more DNA pieces of genetic material than we do. We only have about 22,000 genes. Some species of rice have 44,000 genes. So it's not the number of genes, it's how they're interpreted, what combination, what pattern is happening in this gene, this gene simultaneously that turns something on or something off. So we're very complicated. So again, epigenetics are marks that turn a gene on or off, but here's the other catch. We found out now that some of these marks you can pass on to your children and their children. We never knew there was a way to pass on heredity. We never knew what that way was until now. And you know, sometimes epigenetic marks stay for some period of time, permanently or just 1 or 3 generations. We're still exploring all of that, but that's the fascination, because that means that lifestyle and lifestyle choices that affect our epigenome may also affect our children and our grandchildren. Big responsibility all of a sudden to whether to have that pizza, cigarette, and Diet Coke, huh? Some of these marks are permanent, some of these are not. But even the ones that are not, we know that they leave a trace. We call it a shadow. And cell memory is at the basis of this. So cell memory is really epigenetic marks that have either faded or not, but it turns out Shakespeare was right. Everything important in our life marks us. We are permanently or not, but we are marked. And the cell of the body remembers all of those very important events. This is a huge field. It's exploding. There's epigenetic studies on everything. I get alerts whenever this study's published. It's now becoming annoying. There's too many. But just as an example, there's a lot of work being done in childhood trauma, poverty, abuse, because it's always been puzzling why it's so hard to break the cycle of poverty and violence. And this may turn out to be a huge reason. I love the title, Why It's Not in Your Head. Epigenetics, adverse early life events may alter genes, and that may be passed on generation to generation. So very important work being done in all sorts of fields that involve epigenetics. So let's move on to something a little more practical, because you may not have a dog and you don't have a grandma that you're worried about, but we all have this gene that I'm going to talk about next. So this is a picture of an agouti mouse. Not really, but close enough. Agouti mice have a defect, a mutation in the agouti gene that makes them voraciously hungry all the time, makes them very fat, they get diabetes, heart disease, and they die young. Sound like anybody you know? So this is why they're very well studied. They're genetically identical all over the labs, all over the world. So everybody can study an agouti mouse, and it's the same identical genetic mouse, okay? We all have an agouti gene. Every mammal has an agouti gene. Now, 20 or so years ago, these two amazing researchers, Waterland and Journal, came up with an idea. They say that they don't even know why they did it, but they did. They took, let me just back up for a minute. Agouti mice tend to give birth to agouti mice, 75 to 25. Pretty much most of them are agouti mice. And normal brown little mice tend to give birth to normal brown little mice, with a couple exceptions here and there, but almost always that's the way it works. With that background, these researchers took two agouti mice. They were both genetically identical. They're both pregnant. They're both agouti, so they're both yellow, fat, diabetic prone, heart disease prone, and so on. These two pregnant mice, one of them was given extra nutrition in the form primarily of methyl groups from B vitamins in this case. And the one that received the extra B vitamins gave birth to normal brown mice. The one who did not, of course, gave birth to what you expect, agouti mice. That's the first time that's ever happened where you can influence the outcome of offspring with intrauterine or pre-delivery, if you will, intraembryo nutritional changes. Kind of sounds like folate and spina bifida kind of things and other things that we know we need to have during pregnancy, but this was different. This is taking a mutation. An agouti mouse is a mutation where that gene is fully expressed and it makes them very, very sick, and turning off that mutation in pregnancy to deliver a healthy mouse. Fascinating, but it gets better, I think. So this is just a picture of that. I apologize, I should have shown you this before. So an agouti mouse's agouti gene it turns out, is expressed fully as a very fat, very sick mouse because it has no little green methyl groups on it. Whereas the brown, normal, healthy mouse has an agouti gene just like you and I do, we all do, but its agouti gene isn't properly methylated, so not to express this voracious appetite and all the things that follow. So then the researchers did one thing even more interesting, if you will, I think. They did the same experiment, but a bit in reverse. Bisphenol A is a toxin that's now classified as a carcinogen. It's been around, we all have it. If I measured any of you, myself included, we all have measurable levels of bisphenol A. It was in plastic water bottles, it was in baby nipples, it was in receipt paper. We all have been exposed to it. And just another disclaimer, we are not mice, just to be clear. This experiment was very interesting, however. They take two genetically identical, normal brown little mice now, but they're both pregnant. So now we have two little brown mice, normal size, normal everything, but they're both pregnant, and they're both exposed to this compound called bisphenol A. And to one of these two pregnant mice exposed to bisphenol A, just to one of them, they get extra nutrition. And what happened was phenomenal. The brown mouse, who typically gives birth to brown mice, once they're exposed to bisphenol A, gave birth to agouti mice. The brown mouse who was pregnant, also exposed to bisphenol A, but who got the protection of extra nutrition, gave birth to normal brown mice. Pretty cool. We're not mice, we're not that simple, but it's a really interesting explanation of how important the environment is, both directions, toxins and nutrition, and how we end up being healthy or not healthy. And so where do these methyl groups come from? Like, what is a methyl group? So it turns out you break down your food to get methyl groups. Like this little funny diagram shows, you got food on one end and then little methyl groups that are those green things sticking onto the DNA, the double helix of our DNA, to tell the gene to express this part and not that part. Where do these come from again? The Mediterranean diet. Plant-based diet is the richest source of methyl groups. There's methyl groups in other foods, don't get me wrong, but if you want to get the most methyl groups for your bang for your buck in food, it's these. It's the colorful produce that we're always talking about eating. Nature is indeed smarter than us sometimes. It put what we need to be healthy right in the foods that we're designed and supposed to eat. These are some of the diseases, really, also symptoms that have been associated with lack of methylation. And they range from everything to everything. You probably can't think of much things that happen in terms of chronic disease that are not somewhere on this page. Methyl groups are very, very important. Methylation pathways are complicated and very important, and there's more to it than just this for certain people who have other medical problems, but for the vast majority of people, eating more fruits and vegetables is all they need to do. And the reason the serving size keeps going up, you may know, is because our food quality keeps going down. We grow in monocultured fields that are not terribly well taken care of in terms of putting nutrition back in. We grow for looks and prettiness and for shipping capabilities. We no longer grow for nutrition the way folks did with victory gardens and other kinds of agriculture in the past. And so some produce, by some accounts, has lost up to 40%. Broccoli, for example, of nutrition that was available just a couple of generations ago. And that's why the increase in size and number of servings of produce has gone up every 5 years by the USDA. This is one of those reasons. The other reason is we need more nutrients living in the environment that we're in. We have more toxins, more pollution than we've ever had before. Maybe more stress, maybe not, but I think so. More lack of sleep, all sorts of things that negatively affect our health that would be helped, that would make us more resilient to those things if we had enough plant-based nutrition. Unfortunately, the idea of doing this is great in theory, and some of us can make it happen, but a lot of us can't. And a lot of us can make it happen sometimes, but most of us can't make it happen every single day. Because the truth is, what they're saying is 7 servings a day per person for a family of 4 comes out to 196 servings of produce per week. That's a huge shopping cart. That's a huge shopping bill. That's a lot of food to clean and wash and prepare. And for the most part, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen for lots of reasons. It doesn't happen because people don't even know they should, primarily. People can't. They can't find produce in certain areas. We have food deserts all over this country. The cost can be incredibly prohibitive. You can feed a family of 4 fast food for the price of 1 good salad. That's not right. We have to change that. So availability, some people didn't grow up eating fruits and vegetables. They don't have a taste for it. They have to teach their mouth, their taste buds to like it again. And if you didn't grow up with it, that's hard. And it's hard to teach your kids if you didn't grow up with eating vegetables. Digestive issues are the #1 issues of Americans. If you just watch television, you'll know what the ads are, right? And so a lot of people may want to eat these things, but don't digest them well, therefore don't absorb nutrition very well. Therefore, we're back to square one. And again, just don't know what to do with them. So, all of these things I was seeing day to day in my practice all the time, trying to encourage people to eat more fruits and vegetables, having a hard time doing it myself. I travel a lot. I'm busy, like we all are. It was difficult. So 20 years ago, I came across a solution that I'm incredibly grateful for, which is called Juice Plus, which is nutrition in a capsule. And I have to be honest and tell you, in the beginning, I was very cynical and not even very nice. I said, this doesn't work. You can't make this work. This is impossible. And then they showed me the research, and I read every single word of it, and I was blown away, and I have not missed a day since. Juice Plus, what is it? It's a capsule of food. It's a food concentrate. It gives us everything we need to bridge this nutritional gap that we all suffer from. It's real food, not a supplement. The label is a food label, like carrots, like oatmeal. It's not a supplement label. I think that's very cool. It's real food that they grow themselves specifically for this purpose, to be densely nutritious, not to ship well, none of that. And then they allow it to vine ripen, which is where the majority of nutritional concentration becomes available from the plant. Then they can harvest it when it's vine ripened and process it immediately, keeping it cold from then on, so you lock in that nutrition. Then they pulverize it, which is critical, because juicing you get some good for sure, but pulverizing actually makes the antioxidant levels go up, and you're getting many more components of these plant-based foods rather than just the juice. It's amazing. They blow off the water at that point, and then you have a powder, and then you put it in a capsule. It's really very simple, minimally processed. And then we have a fourth product called Omega Blend, which is newer, and I love it. It's fishless fish oil. Fish oil has been bothering me for sustainability reasons, as well as plastics, microplastics in fish oil now. So I switched off of fish oil a while ago, but then this came along. It was even better. It's omega-3s and a balance of all the good omegas, with using algae and 5 different cold-pressed seeds. So things that we should eat, foods that are real foods for human beings, algae, seeds, giving us the nutrition that we need. So stepping away again from the model of fish oil, manipulating the ratios of EPA, DHA, thinking that we know better and making it into a medicine. I'd rather have the food and see what happens with that first. My motto is physiology before pharmacology. So eating algae and seeds in a compressed formula in a capsule that can give me the healthy balance of omegas, but that are food-based, makes a lot more sense to me. And it turns out, that's right. It turns out the one study we have so far and the second one in progress shows that a smaller amount of those same chemicals, when it's plant-based, works better than a large amount of fish oil. This is what it looks like. 30 plus raw fruits, vegetables, and berries in a variety of colors. They use the skin, the seeds, the stems. The skin has incredible amounts of nutrition, and many of us don't eat orange peel or lemon peel, and we're missing out on that, but we can get it in the form of Juice Plus. The bottom of the broccoli, the top of the pineapple, all these things have nutrients in them, but we generally don't eat them. And we certainly don't eat, or at least I can't, 30 different colorful things raw every single day. And that's so important to flood your cells, to have a constant availability of antioxidants to counteract the free radicals that inevitably happen in our day-to-day existence. So it's really a unique product. It's not a supplement, it's food with the food label on it. It's obviously dairy-free, and it's kosher, and it's very clean. It's been independently tested by NSF, one of the premier independent, not-for-profit for that matter, third-party labs that verify all sorts of different companies and claims, and they verify that our product is clean and that everything is grown with no pesticides and fungicides and so on, and that everything that we say is in it, and everything we say about it is true. But fundamentally, the reason I'm here and the reason I haven't missed a day in 20 years and I love speaking about this is because of the research. And there's 40 now, peer-reviewed, published research, clinical trials in people, not hamsters, not cell petri dishes, none of that, real people, young, old, healthy, sick, elite athletes, you name it, everything in between. We have clinical trials on those that are published in major journals. And I unfortunately don't have time to go over all 40 of those with you, but I'm going to touch on a couple of them in a second. But the other magical thing about Juice Plus to me is its price. It is so affordable. I don't really know how they do it. I'm afraid to ask. You can get 30 raw fruits and vegetables in a concentrated form that has clinical proof that it actually gets in your cells and works for as little as $2.50 a day. I don't know about you, but I can't buy very much for $2.50 a day. A cup of coffee at Starbucks, maybe a third of a thing of blueberries, maybe. Not very much you get for $2.50 a day. And it gets even better because there's a wonderful family health program where children ages 4 to 18 and even until 26, if they're in school, can get Juice Plus for free for up to 4 years. Not a teaser, 4 years. As part of a survey study that they've been conducting for over a decade in 13 countries around the world. You can see the results of that on the website I'll tell you about. And it's a marvelous opportunity, again, for affordability, because then a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, can all be taking Juice Plus for $5 a day. That's it. 4 people for $5 a day. I dare you to beat that with any other health program ever anywhere. Even a shake costs usually more, much more than $5 a day, let alone a green drink. We also have a protein shake called Complete that's amazing because it's also real food, very high quality food, probably the best made protein shake on the market. And then the Omega blend, which I mentioned earlier, is the fishless fish oil. This is the family health study called Healthy Starts. And this is some of the research clinical trials. And just, quickly, these are some of the hospitals and university centers that have conducted these trials. And if you are judged by the company you keep, I'd like to be in this company. Actually, I am in this company. Yale is in there somewhere. But these are prestigious university hospitals literally all over the world. And we get requests, the company now gets requests from researchers every day, all the time, to do research on this product. So a dear friend and my hero and someone I wish I was more like, named Richard Du Bois, Dr. Richard Du Bois, said it best one day. He said, there's nothing available anywhere else in the world with or without a prescription that has been clinically proven to do what Juice Plus does. And he is so right. So just really briefly, a few of the studies that are pertinent to epigenetics. Actually, I'm just going to tell you about one of them. But these are the other 3 that I'm not going to go into that have been done. And it's interesting because they span the entire age spectrum. That's why I like mentioning them. So always placebo-controlled, randomized, meaning blind clinical trials that we're talking about, and we're always talking about statistically significant improvements. And so even in middle-aged folks, which is hard to do, there's a significant decrease in DNA damage over time, over just in 2 months. In a young population, there was also a even bigger decrease in DNA damage over time. But the most impressive, I think, is in elderly people, even some smokers, there was a decrease in DNA damage over time. Very hard to fix that the older you get. But the most fun study, I think, of all is the study that they did more recently, a couple of years ago, looking specifically at gene expression, looking specifically at how when people take Juice Plus versus placebo, what happens to the way their good genes and bad genes are expressed. And it turns out that people who take Juice Plus and not people who take placebo end up having 1,600 genes activated to make them healthier. 1,600 genes that affected all sorts of different important things. Whoops, all these fancy things I forgot about. They affected inflammation hugely. Juice Plus drops inflammation like a rock. And the more inflamed you are, the more it lowers inflammation. And it does it very, very quickly. It also lowered the bad kind of cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. And all the different markers combined, inflammation markers, altogether found that there was a significant lowering of your total risk of heart disease and stroke because of these changes. And there's also an increase in lean body mass and doesn't want that. So one little intervention that we know makes sense because we're all deficient in plants has been shown over and over and over again to do just what we need, lowering inflammation, heart disease risk, and so on. Again, we have what we need. We just need to find a way to figure out to make people do it. We don't need more studies, we know. So one other way to help people achieve this goal of eating more plant food and be able to afford it, enjoy it, is a tower garden, which is the other fabulous product that Juice Plus has. It's about the only, I told you all of them. It's a very small group of products because they're all geared toward helping people eat more plants. So Tower Garden is an independent growing system. It's about 3 foot across or much smaller for the inside version, which I'm not showing you here. 3 foot across, what you're seeing here, a hydroponic, aeroponic food system that takes up almost no space. It takes up nearly no water compared to conventional gardening, grows 3 times faster, and has a much higher yield than the best organic gardeners head to head. It is a magical thing for families who would like to eat more produce but can't afford it or don't want to spend the money on that. It's also magical because kids love eating things that they grow and that they see growing and that they can go pick themselves right before dinner. Go pick the salad, take a bowl and a scissors, and you cut it through leaf saw several different plants, and the plants continue to grow and to give you food day after day after day. It's a magical thing, and it's my favorite go-to when I have a large family, and the idea of spending that amount of money on that much produce frightens them. They can have a tower garden for really pennies. It just about it pays for itself within a month, 6 weeks at the latest. And so with that, I think I said this already, but sustainable. Yeah, no question about who touched your food when you have a tower garden. No question about who sprayed it, who didn't spray it. None of that. It's yours, and only what you put on it is there. It's certainly sustainable, but it's the way of the future. Being independent in your food supply is a very, very comforting feeling. I'm looking at my tower in the corner of my living room as I speak, with chard and celery and parsley and mint and all sorts of different salads, arugula, kale, bok choy growing out of it. I can go to my tower any night and cut salad and cut a stir fry and don't have to go to the store. It's very, very nice feeling. So to summarize, food is information. Food tells you what genes to turn on and turn off. So choose your food wisely, because processed food turns inflammation on and turns other kind of bad genes on as well. Plant-based diets, however, turn off the bad genes and turn on the healthy ones. It lowers inflammation. We know it reduces chronic illness by up to 75% just having a plant-based diet. So epigenetics is the answer to how nature and nurture interact. And epigenetics is affected, altered, marked by our diet, by our environment, by the microbiome, the kinds of bugs we had growing in our bellies. All our major life events are signaled and marked and may or may not be passed on. I hope this was helpful, and I have one last wish. Please eat more produce. If nothing else, start having a big salad every day if you haven't already, or two if you're already having one. Just eat more produce. Please eat a lot less or no processed food and sugar. That would make a huge dent in the health crisis that we're seeing and in your personal health and being. Consider adding Juice Plus to your diet. It's food. I eat my Juice Plus. I include it in my food budget. It's part of my food allocation, and you can get your kids on it for free. So give them that gift of health as well. Share our story, this plant-based story, this how it's not that hard to fix this chronic health problem we're having if we just all started doing the right thing with our lifestyle. But again, in your patio or your deck to get Juice Plus for your in our omegas, that would be my wish for all of you. So I bid you a wonderful rest of your day, evening. I look forward to the next couple of days. I hope you are too, some of you. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you feel empowered, that you have something positive to take away. That would be my honor if that were the case. So thank you all, and good night.